Yeah, the beauty of that as well, like, and something that I think people can mess up really easily with this is they go, all right, I've created this phase where we've gone through these 4 different variations of the split squat, and their immediate thought process is, well, what am I going to have to do with all the other work? Or what am I going to have to do with the accessory work? Now, there's 2 options. One, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because the way that the intention behind that main exercise that I had here is progressing in itself, but it is still the intention of intensity. So everything else is going to load manage and positionally manage that same thing at the same time. So the only variable that I change within the 24 weeks can literally be the progression of that main exercise, which is one exercise, and everything else could stay the same. Now, some people may not be able to do that from like a novelty standpoint. Like they may not be able to do 24 weeks of a similar style of program of all the other exercises going. But, and this is the key thing, if you have your exercises categorized with the secondary and tertiary benefit, instead of doing the 45-degree hip extension, I could just put in a hip thrust. And now it's a completely different movement, but the intention of what I've been trying to do here is more a pelvic rib cage relationship of what I'm doing. So I could do it for 12 weeks. I could go 6 weeks of 45-degree back extension, 6 weeks of hip thrust, 6 weeks of 45-degree back extension or hip extension, and then hip thrust. The other way that you could look at this, and like we haven't dived into this, but I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, is right, I'm going to remove that hip thrust out, or the 45-degree hip extension out at 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a neutral grip lat pull down that is going to force them to have to stack rib cage over pelvis. Now what I've done is I've done the exact same intention of what that exercise was, which was reintroducing function of rib cage over pelvis and making sure that that book end of those spectrums is still adequately loadable. But now I'm doing it in a more challenging means because we're going overhead. So those lats are having to come to the party as well. And like it's a position where we automatically want to try and go into extension. I go neutral grip lat pull down, driving those elbows in front of you. That has to create that position where we stack rib cage over pelvis, where the rate limiter is core function, is the ability to stack there. Now, you people see that and they go, but that's not the same exercise. And they're right, it's not. It's an upper body exercise versus a lower body exercise, but the tertiary or maybe primary or the secondary benefit of both those exercises are the same, and that's the same exercise. That's the progressive element that we were speaking about. A 45-degree hip extension, when looking at the means of rib cage over pelvis and holding here, is a lot easier, or is a regression of when I go to a lat pull down in a neutral grip where I have to keep the stack, where I have to actively be able to not allow myself to get into this extension or flare these ribs or break that pelvic relationship, that pelvic rib cage relationship that's there. 2 completely different exercises, literally the opposite sides of the body, but the same exercise when we look at this. And this is the program. Like, and that's a lot more advanced thinking when we go about this, but that's exactly what we're trying to get like the conversation going there, is like, that's the primary, secondary, and tertiary benefits of exercises. And that's where like the bird dog and the row, yes, they kind of look similar. And this is the exact same example, the 45-degree hip extension and the lat pull down when cued, and what we're trying to do is the progressive element from each element or each exercise position of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, like I think trade-offs is like the best word that we're looking for here. Like, you know, when you talk about the things that you know, when you're prescribing that, whatever, front foot elevator, that continuum of split squat of some extent, like loadability is obviously going to be a factor, right? When you go from your split squat to your walking lunge, you're not going to be able to load it as well. But that's not the only thing that we care about, right? It's better access to positions, right? So I've said this before, but like movement proficiency itself is, you know, a progressive stimulus, right? Progressive overload and progressive overstimulus, like something that we talk about in the course. But it's like, if you have clients who don't have great access to certain positions, and we choose exercises that get us better at those positions, they're just going to get more out of their exercises too. So it's like understanding, you know, the primary, secondary, tertiary benefits of the exercise. It's like, you're getting clients who, they might not be getting the same thing out of their split squat or their Smith machine split squat as they would their walking lunge, right? But the walking lunge, just because it's less loadable, doesn't mean it's any less important, right? We're recouping that function that we're not getting from the first exercise in the program, right? And you're going to see those things trickle over the course of the week, over the course of the session itself, and over the course of the weeks and months that we're programming for the client. Right, like if you have a client who has no access to the overhead position whatsoever, starting them with that high cable bicep curl, like you said, that might be the only place that they can really remain comfortable and maintain a stable position in that overhead range. Right, slowly, biasing that upward rotation, things that clients really need but don't have. Right, and then eventually working to maybe that overhead tricep extension, where now we're challenging that ability after we've worked a couple weeks on just the ability for the weight itself to bias that position. Right, but like if clients can't get into that overhead, staying within their active range, right, if you're just chasing load, we're always going to run into an issue of either buy-in or the client's just going to get bored and like realize that they're not making progress. But it's like the fact that they are getting better at the exercise itself is a progressive stimulus. Right, they're going to get more out of that exercise, even if the weight is the same. If they're getting into a range that's more in the overhead position that they've never been exposed to in their life, right, they're going to be training the muscle more effectively and more efficiently, which is going to again have those trickle down effects to the rest of the program and other positions that we desire them to get into as well.
Yeah, I think the core, like when driving these progressions that we're talking about, and you just mentioned as Schultze, is, we always have trade-offs. And if we can keep in mind what we're like giving up when selecting specific exercises, so if it's going to be like this, I'm giving up the ability to load. Well, just keep that in the back of your mind. I'm giving up some function. I'm giving up, I don't know, it may be recoverability, whatever it may be. The important thing is people, I think, get into the habit of thinking if I'm giving up something, then that's bad. But sometimes that's exactly the thing that we are trying to give up right now. Like we're trying to underload them in this specific session because the other session is going to be different, or because we're coming off the tail end of a training block that was very high in load and now we need to switch parameters, or we're purposely giving up functionality or the ability to move through certain ranges because we're trying to learn a skill or because we're trying to reintroduce function. So if we can understand that every time we're going to be giving up something, but if we can play it to our advantage and be smart about it, what we give up can be exactly what we're trying to give up, instead of just like accidentally giving up aspects that we're not intending, or maybe not even visualizing, because this whole, and going back to like what we're talking on one, this whole indexing of like different like secondary, tertiary benefits and different properties of the exercises are not super clear in our mind, then we just end up selecting exercises and giving up stuff that maybe wasn't intentional, and then our program just we just turn into putting out fires as the program progresses into like upcoming blocks. And not to say that that's not going to happen. That's probably going to happen, but it can be a lot more directed and minimized if done appropriately.
Yeah,
we all agree there.
I think we all we all agree from that side. It's like I can understand the concept behind it can be foreign, and like that's where like that's not new to me from the standpoint of like it can be a very foreign concept, but the idea behind this is just start thinking a little bit more around the extra benefits of these exercises. Like everyone just wants to think again. Everything is so muscle centric. It's like that's the problem, is muscle centric. It's like, so let's come up with solutions around this. It's like you can have muscle centric intentions around certain blocks or certain phases,